an hour.
On Revealing Secrets today, showing in a past of evil spirits and dark superstitions, and the hidden identity of the artist behind this handsome portrait. But first to rugby, where we explore the hidden depths of Gordon Wither's 19th century diary.
10 to 15 years ago I bought a load of books, literature at a local sale room, and this diary was in amongst the artefacts. It's a thick black diary full of interesting old-fashioned writing with numerous pictures of hydrotherapy centres, Harrogate, trade cards, and different things inside. I read through it as much as I could, and I couldn't really find out who the person was that was writing it. And another thing was the writing seemed to change, so I was a bit bemused which was doing what in the diary. But it's just one of those things that was interesting to read because it was a Victorian person writing it. I know nothing about the diary at all. I assume it was a man writing it, but that is part of the mystery that I'd like to find out.
The diary was not signed, but by studying an old guest list from a local paper preserved on the inside cover of the diary, we established that the authors were Henry Wheeler and his wife Sarah.
I have for many months been suffering from a rash on my legs and hands. I have consulted William Roberts more than once, and he has prescribed, and I have followed his orders. He tells me it is gout in a mild form, and if it does not go away, I must go to Harrogate.
Well, if Punch is to believe, they did a satirical look at Harrogate in the 1880s, and they described it as the Klondike of England because it was such a buzzing place, so many people coming here. The spa was very fashionable, the entertainments were superb, but of course the Swan, or the Harrogate Hydro as it then was different because it was a centre for genuine hydrotherapy. You had all the Turkish baths and treatment rooms, restrooms, so the guests who came here were probably genuine seekers after health, as well as those who wanted to participate in the high life at Harrogate.
Henry could not resist and joined very lustily in hallelujah, hallelujah. People said Mr. Wheeler is made of music, he can't help himself. We have had an exceedingly pleasant Sunday evening.
The 7th, a lovely morning. I have had my boil looked at by Dr. Veal, and he pronounces it going on very well, and I really believe it is better.
I think it's significant that the Wheelers stayed for at least 6 weeks, and this was typical of the time. After all, it was in the interest of the doctors and innkeepers to keep them here as long as possible, because it was all fee-paying, so they'd earn more money the longer the stay was. But also, if you travelled a long journey to Yorkshire, it was obviously sensible to stay as long as possible to get good value for that money. The rooms that were then in the Harrogate Hydro were fairly typical of any large establishments. Firstly, a lounge, literally where people were less formal. You would have had a more formal drawing room, where guests in their formal clothes would meet other guests and have receptions. The drawing in, you see, that's how you get the term drawing room. You'd also have had a reading room where people could just read for leisure. Certainly we know from the records that the Harrogate Hydro used to practice family prayers twice a day, and guests were expected to join in with the family prayers.
I like the reading room the best. It is so cheerful and warm. 7 windows, all opening onto pretty ground. The sun shines all around.
We're now in the former reading room, which the diarist specifically mentions as being a very bright and airy room let all the sunshine in and the light. And you can see that if you look over at these windows here. The diarist talks the 7 windows, and there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over there, 5, 6, and 7. Now, they were blocked in the 1890s when the Winter Garden was erected. So, of course, that wasn't actually up when the diarist was here.
The dining room is very large. Here we have our meals, which are plain and good, the chief commodity being milk and porridge. We have nothing stronger to drink other than ginger ale. I am rather longing for some of our good old 47 port.
If you look around this splendid room, you'll see there's quite a lot of ostentatious architecture here, and that belies the kind of food that you would have had in the 1880s. You see, this was part of the remodelling of 1878, when Dr. Wiegel established here in Harrogate the Harrogate Hydro, and that entailed very sparse living in terms of food and drink. There had been lots of fish, white meats, plenty of wholemeal foods. Drink would have been cold water, possibly fruit juice, more likely ginger ale, that sort of thing, but no alcohol. But of course that was all part of the image that the owners wanted to impart to their guests, so they could entail the best of the rather austere hydro living amidst luxurious surroundings.
Harrogate's Pump Room Museum is home to a number of hydro exhibits, including a 300-year-old sulphur well the Wheelers mention in their diary.
There is a rather ridiculous painting in one of the windows put up as a thanks offering to Harrogate for its waters. The subject is an angel stirring up the waters, and they are troubled, but the whole thing is laughable.
But basically there were 2 kinds of treatments, internal and external. So if you had a skin condition, such as erysipelas, you could bathe the affected part of the limb in the water, and it would have a curing effect in many cases. I mean, these have been documented. You also had the internal treatments, which consisted of consuming quantities of water. Now, if you had worms, a dose of strong sulphur water would kill the worms and flush out all their offspring. So it was a real strong purge, and it worked.
We searched the 1881 census for Henry Wheeler and found him at an address in Cheltenham. Next step was to examine his probate, and in doing so, we discovered some key clues. Firstly, he left a very large sum of money to his wife, Sarah Isabel. There are frequent references to an Isabel in the diary, even though on the census she is wrongly registered as Sarah J. Wheeler. It also made reference to a second address in Southport, which, like the one in Cheltenham, was called Middleton Lodge. Guessing this was more than a coincidence, we returned to the census and found the Wheelers had previously lived in Middleton, near Manchester. With the help of a local Middleton historian, we discovered that Henry Wheeler was a successful lawyer, whose good work in the community included setting up Middleton's gas and water works. To bring the diaries to life, we brought Gordon with us to see Middleton Parish Church, where Henry was a warden for 27 years. The Wheelers' outwardly successful life was repeatedly touched by personal tragedy, and the church became more an outlet for grief than a simple place of worship for Henry. 2 of his 3 children predeceased him, and his wife, ironically, died in the bath.
I'd like Middleton Archive to add the diary, because it's part of Middleton's history and it should come back to the area.
Sadly for Gordon and the purposes of our story, Henry's most apt donation to the town, the baths his Harrogate stay inspired him to build, no longer stand. But hopefully, thanks to Gordon's discovery, Middleton might once again honour their bathing benefactor. If we've inspired you to look into your old bits of family bric-a-brac, why not give us a call now on 0870 900 2333. Calls will be charged at 8p a minute. Or drop us an email at info@revealing-secrets.tv. If you'd like to know more about any of the stories you've seen on today's programme, why not visit our Revealing Secrets website at www.channel4.com/next step. After the break, the medieval superstitions that led to this shoe being concealed within a wall, and the family painting which divides expert opinion. Coming up on Revealing Secrets, ancestral manoeuvres in the dark, as we try to throw light on the background to this Victorian portrait. But first, the roofs and attics of old houses are a natural hunting ground for revealing secrets. But why should someone go to the lengths of concealing a single shoe behind a wall of a house? Just such a discovery was made 10 years ago, when Nellie Chenery worked in this historic manor house in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire.
Well, it was where I was working, Broadridge Manor in Ford, about 10 years ago. The house was being dismantled, you see, by these workmen, and they found it in the roof amongst squirrels' nests and birds' nests and things like that. Well, I can't think of any reason why the shoe should be in the roof. It was decided to be thrown away, or to throw it away, and I said no, because I felt that there was some more to it than that. For it to be found where it was, in the roof, there must be something more attached to it. After all this time, I would like to know if anybody could say why it was up there, or where it originated from, or anything they could find out about it, really.
The deeds of Waltridge Manor show it was built in the early 1600s. Sir Richard Inglebury, the man who signed Charles II's death warrant, lived here, where it's said he entertained his friend Oliver Cromwell. Another owner was the 20th century cartoonist Bruce Bairnsfather. Were either of them susceptible to superstition?
These shoes were basically used as spirit traps, and they were thought to protect the house against spirits. They could be hidden anywhere in a house, really, where a spirit would be thought to gain entrance, so hence you find them in the thatch or chimney breast floors. They can also be hidden in wall spaces behind panelling, such as in the wall behind me, which dates to around 1500. In folk magic, anything that is very personal is very powerful, and because the shoe retains the shape of its wearer's foot after it's been taken off, then it has a lot of power. Their magic properties change from being spirit traps to just being effectively good luck charms. As you come out of the medieval period and it gets later, people are less worried about witches, and it becomes a good luck charm, much in the same way as horseshoes above doors are now. Things other than shoes are also found and have similar connotations. One of the most interesting sorts of things is a witch bottle. These are, again, hidden like shoes in chimney breasts or under hearthstones. We do have one example in the museum where its contents survive, and the contents of that particular one are urine and copper pins. And it's thought that you'd make one of these witch bottles if you thought in medieval times you were under attack by a witch or an evil spell. And putting the copper pins in the urine and sealing the whole thing and then hiding it within your house would then cause the witch great pain when she passed water until the spell was lifted.
Belief in the magical power of shoes dates from the 14th century and derives from one of England's unofficial saints, John Shorn.
This is St Mary's Church, North Marston, home of my illustrious forebear, Johannes de Shorn, otherwise known as John Shorn. He was alleged in the Middle Ages to have cast the devil into a Wellington boot. Someone in the village was supposed to be possessed by the devil, so he had about his person a boot. He went up, laid his hands on this man, and lo and behold, the devil came out of the man into the Wellington boot. And once the devil was in the Wellington boot, he drowned the devil by throwing the devil into the well. This made this church a very popular place of pilgrimage. In the Middle Ages, people flocked here in very great numbers to touch John Shorn's relics, his bones, which lay just round the corner from where I'm sitting, and to drink the holy water from the well. this place became so popular, pilgrims came here in such great numbers and spent such a vast amount of money that Henry VIII became very jealous. He took the bones and he's taken them, I'm afraid, to the chapel in Windsor Castle. And there they still lie to this day, apparently.
We knew the legend of the shoe, but what of the shoe itself? Could we discover the kind of person it belonged to?
The shoe from Buckingham is in fact a boot, and it's a child's boot from the mid-19th century. It's showing all the marks of having been in an attic for a very long period, including what looked like pigeon droppings. It was made quite simply of leather, and looking at it, yes, it's a simple two-piece construction with one piece going round the heel, another piece forming the toe of the boot. It's very well worn, it's been mended, there's a patch there, and it's got hobnails in the sole. The register of the concealed shoes is in fact something we compile to help us evaluate how common the practice is. We've now got something like 1,300 records all told, mainly from Britain, some from America, Australia and Canada. Shoes were turning up from very odd locations in buildings. They were turning up from walls, chimneys, bread ovens, and they appear to have been deliberately hidden in buildings. The practice was connected with workmen, with craftsmen, possibly with servants, rather than with the masters of the houses.
It seems likely then a superstitious servant was responsible for our shoe in the roof. Nellie seemed happy with her cobbled together history.
Definitely mystery solved, yeah.
Our last investigation today goes to prove that while every picture tells a story, the author of the story may never be known.
It all began when I inherited a suitcase that had belonged to my great-aunt Ada. She died in 1932, but it was quite a long while after that I actually got the suitcase. My father passed it on to me, and I was absolutely fascinated by all the things inside. And I just wanted to find out more about them.
Digging about in the suitcase inspired Helen to research her family tree and discovered a previously unknown cousin living just around the corner from her.
Hi, Jerry. So I went around and met Jerry and was really pleased to find that he'd got a painting that had been passed down the family in his branch, and I'd seen a picture of it before, but it was nothing like seeing the real painting, and it was just beautifully painted, and obviously not an amateur painting, but a professional artist had painted this picture.
All the family knew about the portrait was that it showed a great Aunt Mary and was signed Annabel 1850.
It's what I describe as a sort of classic, comfortable, 19th century great aunt picture. It's not artistically distinguished, however, it's got a sort of directness, a sort of coziness, a sort of decorative quality. They're instant atmosphere makers, but they are not, I repeat, not great works of art. These are, as it were, the sort of Victorian painterly equivalent of photographs. But there is one very critical thing that you've always got to do when you look at a work of art. However much you hypothesize about the provenance and the stylistic attributes, you look to see whether it's signed, if only not to make an absolute fool of yourself. And this one is signed, but actually it's not overly illuminating because one really comes across just the first name written. And here we have, in the bottom left-hand corner, in bold red paint, Annabel, and the date, 1850. Now, that is quite unusual. In fact, I guess if I was to say one only sees that extremely rarely in looking at Victorian portraits. And to my mind, it would suggest one thing, and that is that whoever painted this is a friend of the sitter, or possibly one of their family, who feels no need to finish off the name.
So it's possible the sitter and the artist were related, but the painting is signed Annabel, and the only artist in the family that Helen could trace was called Anne.
time after I'd seen the painting, I started to think about a family tree, and remembered I'd had a letter about 4 or 5 years ago from somebody telling me that there was a lady called Anne Dawn who'd married John Coulson, and she was a painter, quite a well-known painter at the time, who exhibited with the Royal Society of Arts in Manchester and in London, and then went to live in Australia. So I just thought, well, she was quite well known at the time, and obviously a good artist, a professional artist, and this painting isn't by an amateur. There's just a possibility that it could be by her.
It was time to find out more about Anne Coulson and her time in Mansfield. Happily for us, local historian Alan Malachrat has written extensively about her.
Anne Coulson was the daughter of John Dawn and Martha Dawn, and she was born in 1808. She was married in 1831 to John Coulson, and in 1842 he died. For a time she was a local school teacher, but then she expanded artwork, and she did a whole series of portraits and still life paintings. Most women artists in the Victorian period were ladies of leisure, and they painted for their own gratification. Anne, because of becoming a widow, she had to support herself. She, at one period, earned no less than £60 in 1 year just from portraits alone. And when you think that a schoolmaster at that period was very lucky if he managed to get £50 a year. So that was quite an achievement.
This is a self-portrait of Anne Coulson, and this is a portrait by her of her brother, both now held in Australia. Are they in the same style as our mystery portrait?
The techniques that she adopts and the style of portrayal is typically Anne Coulson. There's a very strong family resemblance to known portraits of both Anne, her husband, and also her brother Andrew. Well, my immediate reaction was that it was an Anne Coulson painting.
Well, those pictures in Australia strike me as by a different artist. And the reason for that is that the expression and the general attitude is rather at variance from the picture here. Those Anne Coulsons are rather more sentimental looking, rather more colonial looking. This has a slightly stubborn, direct, not altogether unattractive, but high Victorian feel to it. And those belong to a different area and a different mindset. The Anne Coulsons are a different species, if you want, from the one here.
Alas, our experts are unable to agree. A schism has developed. The biographer says yes, the art expert no.
Well, I think we probably still think that it is by Anne Coulson. And until we're probably proven otherwise, we'll accept that as a fact that we think it is her, that she painted it.
Still like the painting, which I suppose is the most important thing, and maybe one day we will find out, but I don't know quite how.
So, our jury is still divided, but there has to be more evidence. Could the answer to the riddle be hanging on a wall near you? On the next Revealing Secrets, the family fortune built in the back of slavery, and the family fruit bowl made in Norway but buried in a garden in Buckinghamshire.
And if you've got a mystery object you'd like to see investigated or can help the experts with any of the stories in today's programme, you can find details plus updates on past objects at channel4.com/plus. The quiz hour is coming up with Countdown and 15 to 1 next on 4.